Growing up as a young girl in a small village in Kenya, malaria was a constant thing that I had to deal with. I remember my father would walk into my room, feel my forehead, place some pills on my hand, and stand there to witness me swallow them before he leaves. But when I became a teenager and a young adult, malaria was overshadowed by TB and HIV. People were sick everywhere, and they were dying everywhere. So it's not surprising that I've spent 16 years doing HIV research so that I could contribute some knowledge for vaccine design. But in 2014, I was having a discussion with a colleague of mine, and he brought to my attention something that I hadn't seen before. He said, you know, there's new data that suggests that more people will be dying more from non-infectious diseases on this very continent of ours than in the infectious diseases. And I was like, you must be kidding me. I mean, I had spent my entire life working so hard on infectious diseases, but clearly I was very oblivious of what the landscape for non-infectious diseases was on the African continent. So after having a little bit of struggle, because I really did love working with infectious diseases, I decided to take up a position that allowed me to interact between both infectious and non-infectious diseases. So 2 months into my new position, one sunny afternoon, January 28, 2017, I had a phone call. I share my office with 2 other colleagues, so I stepped out to take the call. It was rather not typical for my sister-in-law to call me at such an hour of the day. So as soon as I answered the phone, I could hear her shaky voice on the far end of the line. Dad is unconscious, and the doctors say we have to get him to a functional ICU right now. What? I mean, I just spoke to Dad like a couple of days ago, and he didn't mention anything to do with his health. And why are you talking about a functional ICU? Are there no ICUs in Kisii? That's my village. So I asked all these questions, one after the other, without necessarily giving a minute to respond. And then when I was done, she said, you're right. He was fine. All this actually happened when he was driving. But the doctors in Kisii are on strike, and the ICUs are not functional, so we need to get him to a functioning ICU immediately. I told her, I will call you right back. So I disconnected and immediately called my uncle, who is a doctor. And indeed, he confirmed that my father had suffered a stroke. So I had to figure out what to do after that. Kisii is 190 miles from Nairobi, where I would find a functional ICU. I called my cousin in desperation saying, can we at least lift him to Nairobi, because I mean, an ambulance is going to take 5 hours. And then my cousin said, the logistics of doing that are going to take longer than you just putting him on an ambulance. So that answer was devastating, although I didn't really know actually how I was going to pay for that airlifting. So after what looked like an eternity, and waiting and phone calls, the ambulance that was ferrying my father actually arrived in Nairobi. And he actually laid there unconscious. You wouldn't know what this meant to me. Growing up, I had had all my breakfast and dinner with this man that was now unconscious. I grew up in a very harsh environment where girls like me never finished high school, but he made sure that I finished my high school and beyond, and now I'm standing here as an Aspen Fellow. He supported me. He was very proud of me and went around telling everybody about my achievements and my potential into the future. But on that day, he lay there unconscious. By that time, we had found a neurologist who took him in for surgery. The neurologist looked at our desperate faces and said, there's nothing you can do. Just go home. And that's when I left the hospital. It was 2:30 in the morning. Unfortunately, he never woke up. 10 days later, he succumbed. He was 71 years old. So many questions went on in my mind. Why now? Why a stroke, not an infectious disease? Why were the doctors on strike? Why didn't we have a neurologist in Kisii town so that I didn't have to transport my father 190 miles away in an ambulance? Why didn't we even know that he had hypertension? Why hadn't he been diagnosed with hypertension before? So we could do some preventative medicine. And that's when I realized that I had to do more on non-infectious diseases. That's what my father would want me to do, and that's what I hope you will help me achieve. Thank you.